So yeah, there have been 3 reviews this month all focusing on the Middle Ages. I'll admit that I've been on a bit of a medieval kick lately, but I promise that there will be much more variation in the future. In the meantime, let's take a look at Knights of Honor, a strategy game that arrived in North America in 2005, but was originally released in Europe in 2004. It was developed by Black Sea Studios and published by the legendary Paradox Interactive. Like many other games published by Paradox, you take control of one of many factions during the medieval period to ultimately become the Emperor of Europe. Sounds like a pretty solid concept for a classic strategy game, but does the age of the game hold it back? When you start a new game, you can choose to start in the early, high, and late medieval ages, each featuring different factions to play as. While every faction basically has the same buildings, each faction has their own unique units. The game has a bit of randomness in terms of diplomatic relations, the ruling class, and the special resources of each province, so playing the same faction in multiple playthroughs will provide a bit of a different experience. For this one, I chose Norway and found out that they can recruit Vikings, which are easily some of the best early game units. And now begins the unification of Europe and a bit of North Africa and Asia, whatever. If you've played any other Paradox title before, you'll notice that everything moves in real time. Sometimes the game feels like it moves at a breakneck pace early on, seeing armies marching across everywhere, taking over territories. It's important to know where the pause button is early on and to slow and speed up time. Before doing anything rash, it's important to understand your diplomatic situation and who you are at war with. This can be seen via the political view. It gives you a very macro look at the situation currently. It's also an easy way to set up royal weddings and secure your dynasty, which I recommend you do so as soon as possible. You can also set up trade agreements and alliance if you so desire. My goal to start out with was to war with the Danes, which eventually and obviously will lead to battle. Most early armies that you'll run into will have a ton of peasants to fight. Your armies may be built the same way as well depending on who you choose. As mentioned previously, I had some Vikings to recruit, which only required an axe smith to be built at a province. Most battles boil down to sending your infantry to clash with your opponent's infantry. The success of battle is mainly down to who has the better units, although there is definitely room for tactical play. Funneling your opponents in one area and flanking with your general is a great way to cause a mass rout. Siege battles are also included in this game. Early on, most battles will not have any sort of defensive fortifications and a mediocre garrison, but eventually you'll run into fully fortified towns with stone walls and towers. Siege equipment such as trebuchets and catapults are key to destroying the fortifications, although you can always just rush the gate with your infantry or storm the walls with ladders. I personally felt more enjoyment with the ladder battles in this game as the enemy starts to have some more interesting compositions to go against. This includes far heavier infantry and the OP bow cavalry. Seriously, all these guys have to do is shoot at infantry and stay away from archer fire. If the opposing army doesn't have any cavalry, then you can do a high amount of damage until you run out of arrows. Overall, the combat has definitely aged, especially with having to constantly scroll from one side of the map to the other, and how hard it is to manage units in large battles. There's also just the imbalance I've mentioned, but that seems to be with every strategy game. However, I still had a great amount of enjoyment, especially with the wide array of units to recruit. After battle, you can level up your marshals if they gain enough experience. There are a ton of beneficial skills to learn, but I recommend increasing map movement speed so you can chase down any rebels that will appear. Speaking of rebels, your newly conquered territories will have public order issues as the citizens will feel nostalgic towards their old owners and will occasionally rise up in their name. Most are easy to take out as they usually consist of peasants, but some famous rebels actually have some trained armies that are far more of a challenge. It also will take time to fully gain control of the province and be able to recruit and replenish your armies in it, as well as constructing buildings. I like this feature personally, but I wish it didn't apply to peaceful occupations as well. Even when obtaining territory diplomatically, you still get a ton of public order issues. Outside of marshals that can lead your army, you can also recruit merchants, builders, clerics, and spies to your royal court. I recommend merchants, especially early on, to increase your reserves of that cash money, boy. I also had the most fun from my spies, as I was getting some Total War 3 Kingdoms vibes when using them. For example, I had one spy become the governor of a city in Germany. Initially, I had him sow discontent and create rebellions. Eventually, I had him declare independence and form his own kingdom as a result, naturally making him king. Once I was done warring with Germany, I had him hand over the town to me and was ready to be deployed once again. It's elements like these that help the game to feel ahead of its time despite many of its dated elements. As you gain more and more territory, it's important to know the state of your provinces. Each province will generate a certain amount of food, gold, piety, and workers depending on the villages and buildings constructed. This game features a nice variety of buildings to construct, although there is a set number of building slots per town. Each town can also recruit various units depending on the buildings constructed as well as its location. For example, a town may be able to produce unique Teutonic knights, while another one specializes in Mongol archers. Once you reach the building requirements for those units, you can produce them as long as you have enough food and gold. Some may even be able to provide certain trade goods, which can help to achieve kingdom advantages. Each kingdom advantage that you achieve will provide various benefits, such as a happiness bonus increase from inns and hostels, while others will provide a global morale boost to your armies. I enjoy this feature as it adds more strategic depth to the campaign, as well as providing a secondary long-term goal to achieve, along with becoming the Emperor of Europe. Unfortunately, the game really starts to unravel once you have several territories to manage. There is no way to zoom out of the campaign map. Because of this, you'll constantly be scrolling from one side of Europe to the other. At the same time, rebellions will happen constantly, even with a very happy population with less than 0% of one occurring. It gets incredibly tedious having to constantly put down peasant armies. To be fair, it is a good way to gain experience for your marshals, though I guess it's not all that bad. I should also mention that since this is the medieval times, the Pope does play a bit of a role here. He will constantly call crusades, which feels like every 5 seconds, but I never went on them, nor did I really know how to. Sometimes he will call on one of your marshals to lead a crusade, but that's about it. He can also excommunicate factions, but I'm not sure why or what causes this. If you have a cleric, there is a chance for him to become the Pope, but I never went through this route in my playthrough. As I was crushing all my enemies and became one of the strongest factions by basically every metric, I tried to become the Emperor of Europe. You can either try to outright claim the title or wait for elections. Despite my power and high relations with other factions, I never once got a single vote to go my way. I just figured at this point I needed to conquer all of Europe, which I just didn't have much of the motivation to do so. Presentation wise, I didn't mind the sprite work here. The artwork is also really good throughout the whole game. The music to me is what really stood out though, as it is simply fantastic. What is featured on both the campaign map and during battles fit perfectly and are incredibly memorable. Fun fact, I actually looked up the composer Boris Slavov and found out that he was the same guy who composed the soundtrack for Divinity Original Sin 2. I absolutely love the soundtrack of that game, and my feelings on this one are no different. One thing I want to note before I wrap this review up is that I did experience a decent amount of crashes. There doesn't seem to be a specific trigger on when this happens, as I've had the game crash on me within battles, on the campaign map, and whenever the hell else it feels like it. There is an autosave option, but I still recommend for you to save often just in case. I believe this is a Windows 10 issue, but I can't 100% confirm it. Overall, I did enjoy my time with this one, but I recommend for you to heed my warning regarding the late game. There are a ton of factions to play with, the spy mechanics are well ahead of its time, the music is fantastic, and it definitely is an accomplishment seeing your armies paint the map for you. Unfortunately, the late game becomes tedious, constantly scrolling through the map, constant rebellions, and the incredibly high requirements to obtain the ultimate goal of becoming the Emperor of Europe. I would recommend to play this game like other Paradox titles. Create your own goals and end it once you're satisfied. That's how I plan to treat this one going forward. There was also a sequel that came out not too long ago, so if you want me to look at that one, let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.